Now that I'm self-employed, I find that my new boss insists that I read more comics, which means that I've been able to make a significant dent in my TBR, to be read stack of books. So much so, in fact, that I'm going to split my conversation about some of my recent reads into two separate videos. So very soon, I'll be talking about catching up on old favorite creators and series, but for this episode of For the Love of Comics, I'd like to talk about 3 books by creators I've encountered for the first time. These are the quirky, sad and funny Flake, written and drawn by Matthew Dooley, the giggle-inducing but also mind-blowing Mr. Invincible, written and drawn by Pascal Jousselin, and the magnificent In, written and drawn by Will McPhail. Not only are these 3 distinctive comics that I enjoyed, but they're also sort of the breakthrough comics by their creators. Flake and In are Matthew Dooley and Will McPhail's debuts, at least in the graphic novel form. I think they both have maybe done shorter comics before. And although Pascal Jousselin has apparently been making comics for a while, Mr. Invincible is the one that he really cemented his reputation with, and I believe this is the first of his comics to get bound volumes even in French. It's definitely the first English translation that I've encountered. So join me for a quick look at 3 distinctive debuts. Flake is a British comic written and drawn by Matthew Dooley and published by Jonathan Cape. It starts off as a gently quirky comedy with some odd characters around our hero, who himself is a very impassive and laconic man, set and apparently at peace with his ways, which include operating an ice cream truck that he inherited from his father's business, his friendship with a couple of the locals, and his marriage, which doesn't seem to get a lot of his attention. Howard is a nice, gentle guy, and you get this sense from the very beginning that he's sort of idling. He doesn't expect much from life, and he's not that expressive around his friends or his wife. But the placidity or the inertia of the story is disrupted by things under the surface, things that have to do with family history and buried pain. Without ever becoming depressing or maudlin, Flake goes to some dark places but never abandons the gentle quirkiness or the comedy of interactions. The story evolves into a David versus Goliath situation in which our hero's gentleness and placidity are challenged and almost destroyed by situations and a villain. Although the story does have a quote-unquote happy ending, it was the melancholy in it that I found so appealing, and some of that may have to do with the art style, which reminded me a lot of Chris Ware, but also the autobiographical comics of David Heatley maybe. And for me, what Matthew Dooley pulls off in Flake is getting me to care about the characters. There's a real danger with things being so quiet and being so gentle that an impassive character would just not be someone that a reader can connect with. There's also this notion of quirkiness. At the beginning, I thought there was a danger of this being a little too quirky, in which you have odd, unusual, even non sequitur sort of things happening purely for having them. But for me, Flake pulled off that connection to the characters that allowed the quirk, the melancholy, the good versus evil, that allowed all of these different things to come together. A distinct work with a unique voice. Flake is definitely a book I can recommend, and something that makes me look forward to what the author does next. Next up, we have Mr. Invincible, written and drawn by Pascal Jousselin and published in English, the first 2 French volumes put together into one single volume, published in English by Magnetic Press. Mr. Invincible is called Imbattable in French. There's no Mr. or Monsieur before it. I'm guessing that they couldn't call it Invincible for the English translation because of obvious reasons. I've encountered Mr. Invisible online where I've seen pages shared, and at first glance, it seems like a brightly colored, beautifully drawn European comic. But you don't have to look too hard to see what sets this comic apart. Mr. Invincible is tagged as the world's greatest comic superhero because his superpower is he can break the laws of comics. Time and space as it moves in comics is something that he can exploit. What already sounds like a great idea is given almost pitch perfect execution in these comic strips. Each page is wildly inventive and side-splittingly funny at times, as Mr. Invincible creates loops and paradoxical things across panels and sometimes pages to solve all kinds of superhero problems. And I have to say that almost every single gag on these pages is gold. Mr. Invincible is a no-holds-barred celebration of comics in a way that I cannot imagine any fan of comics not enjoying this. The only thing that occurred to me as I was reading this is how long can he keep this up? How many different gags can we have of this nature? And this is where Mr. Invincible really shattered my expectations. Pascal Jousselin is more than capable. Page after page, story after story, Mr. Invincible doesn't run out of gas. It mines extraordinary results from its experimentation, and its constant invention is truly mind-boggling. There are many things you can appreciate about one of these pages, even digitally, but in the physical format, with the two-page spread and taking the way our eyes move in comics, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, and guiding it for gag after gag, filled with loops and paradoxes, the physical page is exploited perfectly. Reading Mr. Invincible is giving yourself up completely to the author. It's a complicated dance you didn't know you could do until you got on this dance floor. And the reason why it doesn't run out of steam is because the storytelling matches the experimentation. These temporal spatial gags are completely inherent to every single story that we read. The integrity of the narrative, the characters, the comedy being not just preserved but enhanced and made more potent by the physical setup. That's what makes Mr. Invincible such a fantastic comic. I also have to give credit to Magnetic Press for doing a fantastic job with the production. The quality of the printing and the paper is always something that we like, but over here it's so important. The intelligence, the artistic sensibility, and the sheer joy and the love of comics that this represents makes this something that I recommend wholeheartedly. And speaking of things I can recommend wholeheartedly, written and drawn by Will McPhail, is one of the best comics I've read in recent times. Right now, I would probably put this in my theoretical list of favorite comics of all time. And it's strange that it just occurs to me that in some ways it combines what I liked about Flake and Mr. Invincible. This is the story of a young British man who's sort of floating through life and not really finding the kind of connections that he thought he would have at this age. His interior monologue is presented to us in first person, and it's first of all his wry humor and commentary and observation, as well as reflection, that makes him interesting to us. His interactions with people in his life are funny and sad, but when he encounters a young woman and sparks fly, we think we know where this story is going. It surprised me every step of the way, and I don't mean this in any plot twist sort of manner. This is a keenly observed, very funny, beautifully drawn comic that goes to some deep, dark places while keeping its finger completely on the pulse of what makes human beings so worth it. It's difficult to describe the story, as it were, of In without sounding too much like a Hollywood pitch. But what makes In such a triumph is the way that it uses comics to do a kind of storytelling that might remind you of film or novels, but it's never quite the same thing. The interior and exterior representations, the way our heroes' dreams and thoughts are presented in a completely different yet recognizable art style, the way the story moves between realistic depiction and expression, and the tale that it weaves of the slow birth of an adult. In feels a little bit like a Nick Hornby novel adapted by Fellini, but it has a singular voice and tone. This is the kind of book that makes you want to go out and give it to people and say, read this right now. So that's my quick look at 3 recent reads that I greatly enjoyed. Let me know if you like this video. Thank you so much to my patrons and channel members who sponsor these videos 100%. Thank you for watching. This has been For the Love of Comics, and I'll see you at the next video.